Hello and welcome to our Dispelling Homeschool Myth session. Today we are going to walk through some of the common misconceptions about homeschooling and maybe some doubts you've had yourself or somebody has brought to you that now you're concerned about. And we're going to just break all those myths and tell you what it's really like when you're homeschooling. So I am Sunny, I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I'm a homeschool mom of two kids who have been homeschooled with Sonlight since preschool. And the biggest myth that I experienced, I think at the time I had an only child, and I thought you had to have a big family to homeschool. And so when I started homeschooling, I thought, oh, well, this is a normal thing for people to do with only children. Well, I quickly learned that is not true. There are tons of only children who are homeschooled. And joining me today are Christy and Amber, and we're going to find out what their top myths were that they were wondering about when they started homeschooling. Amber, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Amber Severance. I'm a mentor on Sonlight's app and a consultant at conventions. I homeschool 5 children, have homeschooled 5 children. And I think when I first started homeschooling, probably the biggest myth that needed to be dispelled was that my children were going to be weird and they weren't going to be socialized. And I heard it all the time. Even a well-meaning neighbor, when I said I was going to homeschool, said, "Oh, I wish you wouldn't do that." Just sure that my children would turn out to be very odd.
Absolutely. I think a lot of homeschool parents hear that one for sure. Christy, what about you? What was the top myth that you were concerned about when you started?
What weighed on my heart was being ready to homeschool a child that was not typically developing. I felt pretty confident in homeschooling my typically developing children, but I had one who, there were different needs that he had that were not being met in the school that he was in fully. And I could see where I could do something about that. But still, there was just that hesitation and that, is this the best thing for him? I wanted what was best for him. And he graduates this weekend and it has been the best thing. But I think that was one of the biggest things weighing on my heart.
I love that. So yeah, that's proof that myth went right out the window. Yeah, so that's thrilling to hear that. But let's dive right in. We're actually going to start with the one that Amber mentioned, because I think it's one of the most frequently brought up, is that socialization piece. Everybody assumes that if you're homeschooling, your child is not going to be socialized. And I know when I talk to a lot of parents, even their young children, they're like, oh, I've got to get them in daycare or preschool or school so that they can be around other kids and become socialized. So what do you guys say to that?
Well, first of all, what does socialized mean? So that's one thing right off the bat. Do you learn how to be better at something by being with people at your own skill level and your own age or below? Is that what helps you to grow in your social skills and your social awareness? I don't think so. Most 3-year-olds don't learn many good things from other 3-year-olds. And that's kind of true all the way up as far as manners and speaking and all of that. I think another point that I would make is that I'm not chopped liver. I'm actually a person, human being. And when my children are spending time with me, my husband, and I had 5 children, obviously not all at once. So that those older ones just had one other sibling for a little bit. So all of that counts as socialization. We go to church. We have, time at the library, whatever, when they were little. So the socialization piece, I have more to say, but I'll let Christy chime in.
Yeah, I think you model that, you model being involved in, we have had times in our years of homeschooling where we were way too involved. We had too many things on our schedule and we had to pull back. And then we had other times where, it was like, oh, wow, we've been at home and we need, we might add some things to our schedule. So we've had, times where we've gotten off balance on both ends of the spectrum with, what we're involved in, what's on our schedule. But I think we can model this, very well for our children and help them kind of manage when we get too many things. Or I have some of the children in my house are extroverts and they want to be very, very involved in everything that's going on all the time. And every day there's a new, next week, I have a son right now who wants to go to 3 proms. Why would anyone want to go to, but he literally would love to go to 3 proms if he had the opportunity to. So, this is, and then I have another child who is desperate for home. If he's away from home for any length of time, he's like, are we going home now? When are we going home? And that's how he's been since kindergarten. So I think you have to balance each other's needs for time with others. But I don't think that I've met homeschoolers all across the country, and I've met public school children from all across the country, and there are all kinds of social situations with all of those children. Homeschooling doesn't make us especially unsocialized, or especially safe from any trouble with that. I think it's a different choice. It doesn't mean it's a myth that it necessarily means problems with socialization.
I would totally agree with what Christy's saying. And I think one of the biggest things when it comes to our children and their relationships with the broader world, a lot of it comes from what you do as parents, right? Are you engaged with people? Do you have people into your home? Are you a welcoming person? Do you foster healthy relationships with others? Your children watch that, they model that. Christy's so right. You are going to find children who are a little bit awkward in social settings, no matter what school choice there is. And some of it is just maturity and growing up. Some children take longer to bloom than others, right? It's time. And I think there's this thing, if you are looking at your children to make you look good from the time they're tiny, that's not okay. That's wrong, actually. Your children aren't put on this planet to make you look good. And so they are going to be awkward. They are going to struggle. And you're there to help them through that and to model it and to teach them and to help them. So it's really actually very beautiful, I think. So that's a myth that can also be dispelled. Yeah.
Excuse me.
There's a large, my guys are a part of a very large youth group that has children who are from public schools. And the very first time we had moved here, we were brand new. We were selling our house out of state. And we came in for an event, and my son was brand new to the group. He's in 6th grade, going into this huge group. And so I, talked to the check-in person and said, okay, I'm coming with him because he's new. We've just moved here. We didn't even know which building to go to, and basically I said, he is brand new. We are actually living here in temporary housing while we're selling our home out of state. And so I don't know if there's someone, do you know one of the kids that I could kind of introduce him to or something? Because this is a big, room of people. And she was like, it's going to be best if he brings a friend with him. And I was like, what? And this was all mostly public school kids. And that was her solution, was you need to really bring a friend with you if you're going to come into this group. It's, that's best if you just bring a friend with you. And I was blown away by that answer, as coming from being someone that welcomed people in the old, in our other state. I would have taken a new child and introduced him. But really, literally in that group, there was not a lot of socialization that happened. You were supposed to bring it was best if you brought a friend with you in that group. And so these are all, you would think that they would be able to socialize with a new person and welcome a new person, but that was not the solution. So I don't think that we have a corner on awkwardness with social situations in middle school.
Absolutely. And I love what one of you said about modeling. You as the parent get to model so many social things, because that's what I remember about my kids when they were little, is they could talk to adults even though they were little, because they had always been around adults. I was a young mom when I had my older child, so none of our friends had kids really yet. And so we would just take her along and she would talk with all of our friends. And, of course, now she's got friends who, are around the same age and all of that. But she learned very early to talk to adults. And it was something that she was actually complimented on. And people would be like, oh, do her teachers know how bright she is? Or look at her talking to these adults. And I'm like, yes, I do know. I'm homeschooling her. But part of the reason actually that I kept her out of school after we started homeschooling in preschool was that she was so social. And I remember my sister was very outgoing and extroverted like that. I was a quiet, serious kid, but she was the very outgoing child and was in trouble in elementary school all the time for talking in class. And when I saw my daughter coming up, who also had this very extroverted personality, I thought, oh no, she's going to go to school and they're going to tell her to be quiet and listen. And she, you know, is able to contribute to what they're saying and wants to. But I was like, school's going to crush this side of her where she's so confident and outgoing and all of that. And so we have found it to be the total opposite, that, you know, keeping her out of school actually allowed her personality to thrive. And then for my younger child, who is more quiet and serious, he learned, you know, because we were modeling the behavior, you know, would go to a restaurant. Okay, so say, can I please have the, you know, we would walk him through how to place his order, you know, and now at 9 years old, you can't tell that he was ever shy. You know, he's just a little quieter than his sister, but he still talks just fine to people. So yeah, I agree. I think that is a total myth that you, when you're homeschooling your kids, you get to demonstrate to them how to interact with people. You get to help them walk through those situations where they might be nervous, and their personalities really get to thrive in a situation that's more typical of adult life, right? You don't raise your hand at work before you say something. You don't, you know, have to be with people only your age your entire life. You know, all of those situations that in school are not really typical of adult life.
Sunny, you know, one other thing you said, which I love, you said, I have a daughter who's extroverted and I kept her home, right? I talk to so many moms who say, oh, my children just love people. I can't have them at home because they just need people. And I think it's so interesting because it's not as though at this age, school is the only place where there can be people, right? So you have, you know, 3 or 4 hours where you can get school done, and you get solid school done and get it done much faster than you would in a traditional school setting. And then you have the whole rest of the day to have them involved in other things, a dance class or acting class or a sports team or something else. Like the sky is the limit for the activities that a homeschooler can be involved in. I mean, you can get into way too many things, but it's kind of, I won't say silly, but I think that is a huge myth that the extroverted child shouldn't be homeschooled.
And my extrovert complained daily when he got in the car. I would pick him up in car line when he was in kindergarten, and he would get in the car and he would say, it was so ridiculous. Every day he would tell me about the lunchroom, and they had a red cup, and we had red cup for extra minutes today. He was watching the clock because what a red cup was no talking and so everybody sat silently and ate their lunch. And I got the reason they did this is because so many kindergartners threw away their lunch because they didn't have time to eat. They only had a short amount of time. So they were trying to get them to eat before they talked. And so that was the point of it. But he just thought it was the most horrible thing ever that we would have to sit here and eat and not speak to anyone like we're in prison, you know. And he complained every single day about that little rule. He said, we only had 5 minutes to talk, you know.
Well, and absolutely. And I feel the same way about active kids too. One of my favorite things about homeschooling is that they can move around, they can hang off the couch upside down, because same thing, little kids, sitting still and being quiet is not a normal behavior for small children. And so, yeah, they have to do those things at school, but when they're in your homeschool, they don't have to do that. But let's move on to the academic side. I know this was one that I actually heard from a family member who is a teacher and told me that eventually my kids would get to a point that mommy can't teach them everything because teachers are the experts and not the parents. Parents aren't qualified for this. What do you have to say to that?
I talked to my oldest son this week, and this is perfect for this. He's in a chemistry class that's pretty challenging, and he told me this week that he was helping people with the math part of things. And we did co-ops for almost every level. I mean, for a lot of different subjects is what I'm trying to say, but not for math. I did math at home every year until dual enrollment. When we got to pre-calculus, we did pre-calculus, but once calculus 1 came around, he went for dual enrollment at the local community college. And I could have done that at home. I just decided I wanted him to have an opportunity to do that in another environment. But he was able to do that at home with the tools that we have. That's the biggest thing. You don't have to have all of the every subject. You don't have to be an expert in every subject in order to teach your children. You know them best. You know what they need. You can, if you don't know, you're going to be the most apt to find what you need. And there are solutions and tools. I told someone this week that I don't think we do sentence diagramming. And then I found it on the website today. We do have Winston Grammar. It gives a good introduction to that. There are so many tools. Look at the website. Look at all of the options. There are videos that, in certain levels in high school that can help you, instructors that can help you. There are tools that solve every single problem in the book in case you get stuck. There are all sorts of opportunities in the high school level and beyond. And in the early years, whenever my son that had, he wasn't developing typically, just problem solving with him it was in the moment. There were times that was very tough, but I never gave up. I kept looking for solutions whenever I would run into a problem. And that's what we tend to do because there's love behind it. So that's a pretty strong power to get you where you need to go. And so I would just encourage you to be, to realize that you are the best teacher, I think, for your children.
I would, there's a couple things that I'm thinking. Some of the very best homeschoolers I've ever met, so impressed with their children, did not have education as their college background, but they love their children. They were lifelong learners and they figured it out. And there are so many resources. So for a parent that doesn't feel qualified, I would just encourage that. My story is that I was trained to be a secondary education teacher. Well, it doesn't matter what your background is, you're going to find a problem because I was convinced that I couldn't teach my 4 and 5-year-olds to read. I was really, really nervous about those early years. Guess what? Not that hard. It's okay with the right resources. And just my 25-year-old is a great reader. She's working on her second master's degree right now. And so I think she's okay. And I got one that's in nursing school and one that's doing great in college and still a couple more we got to figure out. But so that's one thing. You're always going to find a reason to feel unqualified. The second part of your question, Sunny, is, what do you do these other people, right? I remember a friend of mine who had taught 4th grade for years. And she wasn't teaching 4th grade at this time. And she looked at me and said, "What makes you think you're qualified to teach 4th grade?" And I was like, "Are you serious right now? Like, I think we can handle 4th grade. You guys, it's not rocket science." And I feel like there's so many people that act like teaching children, even through high school, it's like you have to be a nuclear physicist or something. That's just not true. And there's just so many resources and you have the time and you can take the time, you have the resources. It's not rocket science. And I've loved Sonlight for that, even just mapping out that path. I don't have to make it up. But you guys, crazy. The same 4th grade teacher told me she herself doesn't like to read. She's hardly read a book. She looked forward to book report day from her 4th graders to hear about good books.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And I'm like, and you think I'm not qualified to teach my 4th grade? What in the world? Okay. So anyway, you're going to hear it and it doesn't matter. Even if you have a background in education, it's going to come back, Sunny. So I hope that's a little bit of encouragement to moms.
Well, and I want to piggyback off of something you both said. Christy mentioned the fact that you love your child. So you are extremely motivated to help your child succeed. This is something that obviously parents want what's best for their child. And even though there's great teachers out there, they have a whole class to manage. So they may not be able to put that time and effort into, your child the way that you can. And then, like you were saying, Amber, Sonlight lays it out. They make it so easy. And all of us have passed 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, right? Like that was the way I looked at it. I was like, well, I graduated high school. So why can't I, even though, yes, I don't remember the calculus I took my senior year, but can I relearn it? Absolutely, because I learned it once. It might be harder now because I'm older, but I always looked at it as I can relearn it along with my child, or like Christy, you mentioned dual enrollment. If they get to a point that they want to be heavily focused in something that's beyond what I want to relearn or can relearn, I can send them somewhere else for that particular class. But absolutely, I can read to them. I can talk about books with them. I love learning myself. So for me, it was never a question of, well, can I do this because I don't know everything right now? Because you really don't need to know everything when you're starting out with a preschooler.
And Sunny, I love what Lisa, one of the mentors at Sonlight, talks about the ministry of the outsider. And I think even for some moms, you have little people. I know we talk about getting extra help for high schoolers, but even if, let's say you have a whole boatload of little people at home and you have one that's struggling with reading, there probably is someone at your church or a grandparent or someone who would be willing to read with that child and listen to that child read to give them extra practice. It doesn't all have to be on you. And you can still homeschool and have 1 or 2 people that are helping with certain subjects and really make that a really special time. So yeah, it's out there.
I had a developmental pediatrician. You might be thinking that others, the way that others might feel about something is going to be a certain, you just might have preconceptions about what others might think about your desire to homeschool or your decision. And this was the case with a developmental pediatrician that we saw, and you had to wait for a year to get in to see him. And we had already established visiting him with our son before we decided to homeschool. And I had no idea how he was going to feel about it, but I mentioned it in an appointment, kind of almost stealing myself for what he might say, because you never know what experts are going to say. And he was thrilled. And he told me, I think this is the best thing you can do for your son. It's such a gift. I know it must be very scary right now, but if you could go 10 years out, I think you're going to be so happy with this decision. And he told me all the things that he experiences with kids that are in the public school system or in a private school. And he said, your son is not going to experience this whole list of things. And he went down the list of all of these concerns. And he said, I feel for students. And he said, I think you're going to be thrilled with this decision. So from an amazing developmental pediatrician in North Carolina, I will say, it felt amazing to me to just have that little bit of confidence, like that the fact that I was already confident that this is what I needed to do, but it helped me to have someone else saying this, I feel like this is what you need to do, and I think that we just don't know what we don't know, that whole list of concerns that come with the other choice. Once you make this choice, you don't really have to worry about, but there is a whole list of problems on that side. So,
well, and I think that's great what you said about sometimes we assume, the world's out to get us, almost like, oh, we're homeschooling, so people are going to think one certain way about us, or, they're going to say rude things, because a lot of times people do feel comfortable saying rude things, just like they do to women when they're pregnant, or, you're always going to be the brunt of rude comments at various points in your life, whether you want to or not. But I agree with you, Christy, that I've been pleasantly surprised oftentimes when I mention we homeschool and somebody says, oh, that's so great, I love that because of XYZ. And oftentimes they are experts in a field. And yeah, so I think we as homeschoolers should be careful not to walk into every room thinking, everybody's gonna, say something rude to us because we're the homeschool family. Because I think especially today, it's becoming more common and more popular to homeschool your kids. So I think there's even less of that even than, 30 years ago. So yeah, that's a great, very valid point there. What about the myth that homeschoolers are either super advanced? I think about, you're perfect SAT, ACT scores, going to Ivy League schools, or, something like that. Or
Winning the
they're
spelling
sitting at
bees.
home. Yeah, exactly. Winning all the spelling bees. Yeah.
Um,
Or they're sitting at home, not doing any school at all. And so they can't even do basic skills. I feel like people assume it's one or the other. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd love to say that that's true in every school situation,
Mhm.
right? So in public school, you have very advanced kids and you have kids that fail out of public school. In private school, same. You have kids that are at the top of the class and kids that are at the bottom of the class. And homeschooling is no different than that. I'd like to say that I think my kids are pretty average. I think certain of them excel at some things and others excel at different things. And it is true that as a homeschool mom, you need to take that responsibility seriously. If you say, I'm going to homeschool, we need to make sure that education is happening. And it might look different for all of us, but we need to love our children enough to make sure that they have an education, right? That they know at least the basics and are pushed on. Depending on your background too, things will be different. So that's a myth that if your children aren't getting perfect scores on the SAT or your standardized test comes back and not every stay 9 is a 9 or 10, that you're failing. That's ridiculous. Okay. Every child is different. And no matter what school setting you're in, everyone will be different. And I think that with homeschooling, you take the pressure of comparison away a little bit, which I have loved. If my children are the best in the room, I'm glad they don't know. And if they're the worst in the room, I'm glad they don't know.
Mhm.
I had a son who scored very poorly on a math section as a third grader in a standardized test. But guess what? He wasn't stupid and he wasn't horrible at math. But if he had been in a traditional school, I think he would have gotten labeled. And because he didn't get labeled, he had no idea. He just knew that mom decided we were going to do some extra facts practice the next year. We were going to beef up on some things. And that's all he knew. And guess what? He's taking business and doing lots of math in his college major. So he is fine and ended up doing through pre-calculus, did fine. So again, stop with the labels, right? Enjoy your children for where they are. Take their education seriously. It matters. It's important. And it's your job for right now. And if you have also have a part-time job on the side, that's fine. But this all somehow, along with help from your husband or others, their education should matter, but they don't have to be super advanced, nor do they need to be down here. Just enjoy them.
Yeah, everyone's experience is their experience with homeschooling. So if they've seen people who just wanted to say they didn't want their kids in public school or in private school for some certain reason, and they decided to homeschool and they really weren't doing anything. It was they just had we're homeschooling. And then when you began to ask questions, you find out they're not really homeschooling, they're at home. But some people do genuinely have that experience of knowing people that have that kind of experience, or they know people that are super invested in beefing up and being super advanced and wanting to, they know what they know. So they have the experience of homeschooling. So there is largely, everything in the middle, just like there is in public school. I had a teacher in public school who recorded first period and played it all day. And he slept under a newspaper. This in eighth grade, an eighth grade history teacher. This is what he did every day. And I had a high school that also slept every single day in class. He was teaching algebra 1, and he slept every single day. And he said, "You're a good student. I'll give you a C." One time he wasn't grading papers. This was what was going on literally in a public school classroom, and in the same building with excellent teachers where things were going very well. So across the board, there are bad apples. And so I think whether, regardless of the background and which category you're in, that's going to happen. So definitely don't feel pressure to be the most super advanced, and don't, feel like people think that you aren't doing anything. I think people are starting to see that there is a variety of experience and every student is different, and growth in that student is what I'm always after each day. Everybody excels in different areas. Everybody has things that they are really strong, areas they're strong in and that you want to develop. And, my son thinks he needs to play guitar all day, and I'm trying to keep him from doing that, That everyone's going to have their own passions. And so growth in all the areas, even if my son, I felt like the thing that was not his strength, having the time to develop and practice what wasn't his strength in a wise way, where it was a part of our day, was so beneficial. But you don't have to feel like you have to be the most super advanced and knock everybody out with your results.
Yeah, that's so good, Christy, because I was also thinking, don't look at homeschooling as a pixie dust for super amazing academic kids, because that's wrong too. Just because you homeschool doesn't mean they're going to be this crazy advanced. A lot of homeschoolers are very articulate and verbal. And so when those ones talk, it can be impressive. That doesn't mean that they're doing great in math or other things, right? But homeschooling isn't a pixie dust. And again, just like our children aren't born to make us look good. Not every child is a straight A student. Okay. And so even if you have a child who is super bright at something, let's say my kid is getting 100% on all his pre-calculus tests. Well, guess what? He's not learning. He knows it. He already knows it. If he's getting 100% on pre-calc, he's not learning. So I need to be challenging him. And my kids' high school transcripts are not all straight A's. They're not completely way above average in every single subject. It's okay. That's real life. And also, the point of school is learning. Is my child learning? Whether they're on the lower end of the spectrum with their academic abilities or on the higher end of the spectrum. Are they learning? Because if they're not learning, even if they're at the high end, then I'm doing them a disservice. I need for them to learn. That's the goal. And to enjoy learning is also a goal, which is one of the things I've loved about homeschooling. My kids' love for learning has not gotten pulverized. They haven't been punished for being curious, which is a really positive thing. Sunny.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I remember in school, if you were interested in learning, it was almost looked down upon by your classmates, right? Like, oh, what a nerd, or like, why are you into this? And so I love that too, that my kids can get as excited as they want about whatever topic they're learning about. And they don't have that comparison or that peer pressure from classmates saying, oh, well, that's not cool to like that. Why are you into that? I love what you said about the different strengths too. When my daughter was young, she's very much the reading and writing kid and great at that stuff, but math was her struggle. And then my son comes along, struggles to read, but he's awesome at math. And so it's been very interesting for me as a homeschool parent to see how different the kids are and where they both shine in different areas. But neither one of them is perfection in every area. And I love what you said about that if they already know it, they're not learning anymore anyway. So challenge them. And I think homeschool does that very well, which is why you do see kids that are advanced in certain areas, because that's what they're into and they've been able to put that time into it. But let your kids be who they are. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned as a homeschool parent, because my tendency was to say, oh, I took these classes in school, so that's what we're going to take. And as my daughter has gotten older and into the high school levels, I realized, oh, wait, she has different interests than I do. She has different strengths than I did. Like, I was just assuming, oh, yeah, this is the track that everybody does, without even realizing it. It was like a subconscious, these were the classes I took, but she's not into science at all. And I very much was. And so it's been fun to work with her now that she's older and, with your teens, really find out what do they want to do. My goal is to give my kids the best opportunities available, and make sure that we're not doing such easy things that it's going to limit them in the future, but still allowing them to take the classes they want to take and, really study those things they're into. And I absolutely agree with you guys that with homeschooling, their love of learning has not been squashed because of, drill and kill methods at school or peer pressure from other students or things like that. And so I think that's where maybe you see some kids that you're like, oh, wow, they're really advanced at that. Well, yeah, they're really into that. And so they've put that time in to learn those things. So speaking of the time to learn things, let's talk about the fun parts of school. I remember I had maybe a first grader and people were like, oh, she's not going to get to go to prom if you homeschool in high school, like things that were so far beyond anything I was thinking about with a first grader, right? But
one wants to go to 3 and he's a whole
your son wants to go to 3. But I remember the comments about, oh, they won't get to do the school sports or band or theater, any of those fun school activities. There won't be school dances. What do you guys say to that? Obviously knowing better.
Well, I won't. Oh, go ahead, Christy.
My guys were starting out. I think it was even closer to home. The 100th day of school, they had all of these, where they dressed up and they had all of these special little celebrations. I think were the thing that kind of cut at my heart, that I was concerned about. Little silly things. They did this. My son came home from kindergarten talking about Zero the hero because they were talking about place value, and zero changed everything. So it was Zero the hero. And he came in, he kissed his brain when he thought hard, because his teacher did that. We implemented some of those things that I loved. He still, if he's at school and makes a great grade on a test and I find out about it, I tell him to kiss his brain. He's a sophomore in college and I still tell him to kiss his brain. But I think it was the little celebrations that got to me, that I felt a little sad about them not being a part of these things. Even my son got really excited. One day he got in the car and he was so excited, over the top. Guess what? And I said, what? And he said, we have a special guest coming tomorrow and you'll never guess who it is. And I said, who? And he said, Mr. Souther. And it was the husband of his kindergarten teacher. And he was just thought he was going to meet a celebrity and I just loved that little sweet love of kindergarten and him doing these things. But I just started to realize we are on our path. And we're doing what we're doing. There are special things about what we're doing that they will never experience if they go to public school. They will never get to have my husband home 2 days a week and be a part of his life in a major way and know what it is he does every day, and see little bits and get to hear him doing business on the phone. I didn't get to do that when I was a child. So there are some trade-offs, but you can make special things of your own. If they were in public school, we wouldn't get a holiday on their birthday. At home, we can make their birthday a holiday. Maybe we have school on Labor Day and we skip their birthday and we don't have school on that day. There's little special things that you're going to do. And I think the biggest thing is to say, yes, we're not doing that. Oh, that's very sweet, that thing that they do on the 100th day of school. But we're going to do sweet things too that they would not get to do. It's a trade-off. There are trade-offs. There are good things. And don't feel stressed or weighted down by those little things that you feel like they might be missing.
Yeah. I was going to say the fun parts, but then you're also missing out on the complete waste of time parts. And so there's so much.
I'm glad I've never had to make a Valentine's box.
Correct. You know what I do? I make Valentine's pancakes and everything is pink. And my kids have when my older kids are all together, like, oh, we missed the Valentine's pancakes. We're missing green eggs and ham on, St. Patrick's Day morning, whatever. So you come up with your own fun things and it's like a family culture. And then as they're older, they're still talking about it and remembering it with each other. Here's something I remember being struck by this when my oldest was little. We had a neighbor up the street whose daughter, I think, would have been in 6th grade or 7th grade at that point. She was in home ec, and the mom was just bragging on and on about how her daughter helped to make pizza in home ec that day. Wasn't that amazing? And I was going, my 4-year-old helps me make pizza once a month. Or a couple times a month. And so there are those things too that happen at school and you're so impressed. Oh, look, we made planet Earth out of cardboard and I'm bringing it home. And I'm like, well, okay, like we do that at home too. So we're very quick to be impressed with some of what happens in a classroom. And then you realize, oh, wait, it is impressive in the classroom because you got to have 25 people all on the same page doing it. So also, let me say this. My daughter had an opportunity to be in a college production at a very large university. We're nearby a very large Christian university, and they had open auditions for children. And so she was part of a major college production. We're talking a few thousand people over the 2 weekends came to see that production. If we had homeschooled, if we had not homeschooled, that would not have been an option, or it would have been a very touchy one, because tech week, you're up super late at night. I could let her sleep in, whatever. And then fast forward to this year, right now, this same university has a professional theater part, again, open auditions for The Music Man. And so she just went, and there were lots of people, and she got a call back. And without even really trying too hard, she got the part of Amaryllis and Music Man. Well, she's getting a professional theater credit, and this kid isn't wanting to go to Broadway or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying here is an opportunity for my 12-year-old to do this really big, amazing, fun thing. That is, okay, if she went to private school or public school, she might be able to do a little theater something with her middle school. But this is a professional production. It's incredible. Same, Christy's got a son who's very gifted at guitar. I have a son who's very gifted pianist. That kid practices 2 or 3 hours a day, and not because I have a whip, because he wants to do it. And guess what? He has the freedom to do it. And then he can take piano from a college professor at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't need to worry about school. I don't need to get permission to get out of anything. It's just done. There is a trade-off, right? Because if your kids go to school, choir might be worked in, sports teams are worked in. It is a little more effort for a homeschooler to do these extra things. And there is an extra cost often for us. But that it is a myth that they're missing out on so many things. They are missing out on a lot of shenanigans and a lot of wasted time. How many people I talk to, just sit bored stiff in a study hall a couple times a day. So I just think that is a myth that we can dispel pretty easily.
Well, and I remember that in school, sitting there, you had to wait till the end of the class period when you were in high school, even if you were done, or even in elementary school, we always had a book on our desk, because if you finished your math and it wasn't time for reading yet, you had to find some way to entertain yourself. And so I actually remember that when I was in school, and my kids have that flexibility that, they can wake up when they want, they can do school when they want, and then they can do fun things when they want. And like you said, it might be a little more effort, but something that we really have found we love is that we can travel whenever we want to. We're not limited to a school break. Sometimes we take school with us. Sometimes it's just a true vacation. But my kids have been able to experience different places and different people and things like that in a time of year when most kids are stuck in school as well, or you've got to, bring your makeup homework or whatever. And so, I think there's so many advantages that, like what Christy said, it is a trade-off. It's different maybe than what you have in the school, and you might have to be a little more intentional. But for me, I love that we can say, let's go do this. And there's not, the worst part is that I have to figure out my schedule. It's not the kids and trying to figure out that. So let's talk about another myth. This one actually worried me a little bit because I'm a type A, uptight, non-naturally warm, fuzzy person. But oftentimes, you'll think of the perfect homeschool parent, and people are like, oh yeah, I'm not patient enough to homeschool. I'm not a calm personality. I don't like teaching kids, or you might be working and you're saying only stay-at-home parents can homeschool successfully. What do you say to kind of that calm, patient, stay-at-home mom stereotype? And is that what it takes to homeschool?
That is that really gets me. I can't, so many people have said to me, oh, you must be the most patient person on earth, but you're so patient. That's why you can homeschool. And I think, are you kidding me? Like, when do you see me at church? You think I'm going to look impatient and frazzled at church? Nobody looks impatient and frazzled at church. Some people look weary at church and some people look discouraged, but nobody typically blows up at their kids in front of everyone at church. It just doesn't happen. So it's a myth to look around at other people and say, well, they're just also patient. That's ridiculous. No. So let me dispel that one. I am not the most patient person on earth. I think part of the reason God had me homeschool is to pound a little patience into me. So I have had to learn. It's been a sanctifying process. All of us need to learn to grow in our patience. And yeah, there are some, but you know what? God also uses that impatience. I think I get a lot more accomplished, right? Because I'm not super laid back. But even if you're high strung, it doesn't justify outbursts of anger, right? God says no to outbursts of anger. Okay, so this is an area where I can still be motivated, and I can still be a box checker, and I can still try to push my children, and I can do it without anger. And God has had to work on me because I'm not a finished product either. And so my kids have watched me. I hope my kids have watched me grow in patience and grow in that fruit of the Spirit, right? So no, none of us, look, if you're going to wait till you're perfect, you shouldn't have children. We might as well forget it all, because you're never going to be perfect. There's never going to be that. So yes, please don't not homeschool because you think you're not the most patient person in the world. God will help you.
I think too that homeschooling helped me in a lot of ways, because I was in the driver's seat on when that project was due, or when that, things that are time consuming that happen, that come home in their backpacks, and then it dictates your next month of what you're going to be doing. I mean, literally, when they come home and I have 4 children, I don't know how I would be calm and patient enough to be at the whims of how many people, a lot of people, if you have 4 children and they have multiple teachers for every class, you think of when everybody schedules what they're going to do, that's going to be not a recipe for calm and, patience as well. But I've been in a teacher's lounge, as it turns out, with other people who are not always calm and patient either. In middle school for me, I think high school for Amber. But I think that like Amber said, it is a sanctifying process. It is, and there are, working together, saying you're sorry when you need to say you're sorry, and admitting wrongs when you need to admit wrongs, and taking a deep breath and taking a minute, and, knowing your limits. We talked about this in another, yesterday, I believe. Sunny was talking about making sure you have some time each day. If you need to have some time for silence, and, or at least to read a book, or to, I am the exact same. Amen on that. I need some time where I have a minute, and working that into your schedule. You can problem solve until you get to where you need to be. But I do think that there are, again, trade-offs, and there are, with homeschooling, you can work things out in your schedule so that you can approach the day with in the right frame of mind. And you can step away if you need to calm, to find a way to through a situation without anger, or without cruelty. In some cases, when you want to say the first thing that comes to your mind, there are frustrating moments. We should acknowledge that there are frustrating moments. You're in the same house. Maybe you clean something and then you come back and everything's a total wreck from just when you cleaned it just yesterday, and then you come back and everything is. So you have to get involvement from everybody, and cooperation and honesty. Hey, this frustrates me. What can we do about this? Oh, I did this. Let me, my boys will start to chip in, and I'll help with this, but this is a total wreck, whatever it is, whether it's, a mess, or whether it's something in in your academics that you're working through, and you're frustrated that maybe someone's not putting forth the effort they need to, whatever it is that you have to work through these things. And it is a sanctifying process, I would say.
I absolutely agree with, it stretches you and grows you when you homeschool in a lot of ways. But I'm actually glad, so I've worked the entire time I've homeschooled. I'm glad my kids are not just seeing me at the end of a long work day when I'm tired and probably kind of crabby. I'm glad they're not just seeing me when I'm rushing them to get out the door for school so that we're not late, because I think about both of those situations are kind of high stress situations, and knowing what I know about myself, which is kind of that uptight personality, my kids would be seeing mainly my worst if that were the case, if they were gone all day. But because they're here with me all day, they're able to see me all throughout the day, when I'm in a good mood, when I'm not in a good mood. And like you guys said, sometimes you have to apologize to your kids. And I absolutely agree. You should not be getting angry with them. But it does not take this calm, patient person who has all the time in the world to sit there, because I will tell you, I do not like when people dawdle. That's just, I've never liked that. Even in childhood, it used to drive me crazy at school when we'd be trying to get in a line and there would be the kids not in the line. I mean, that's just the way I've always been. But God has worked through my kids being with me all the time to teach me those lessons that I don't think I would have learned had I not been with them. But they also get to see me at my best and my worst. So hopefully that is balancing out. They're not just seeing the worst every day and thinking, boy, mommy's always in a bad mood. It's like, oh no, we really had fun, at noon when we got to hang out too. So yeah, it definitely doesn't take just one certain personality. And I think most homeschool parents would tell you they do not have a super laid back, calm personality. We're running low on time, ladies, but I wanted to get to one more thing. And that is that all homeschool families are doing it for the same reasons. I know one of you mentioned earlier, people know what they know. So maybe if they know one homeschool family who's homeschooling for one reason, they assume all homeschool families are doing that. What do you say? Are we all doing it for the same reasons?
Look, there are thousands and thousands of homeschoolers. I don't even know if you're brand new to homeschooling, you might not realize, because homeschoolers aren't all in the same place at the same time typically. Sometimes if you have a chance to go to one of the larger conventions, you kind of go, wow, there's a lot of people here. But you multiply that by 50, there's and more, because around the world, there are people homeschooling. I know even just from Sonlight's perspective, right? We have customers all over the world. So there are literally thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, I'm sure it's millions at this point, of families who homeschool. There's not a million people who do the same of anything for any reason. So no, and you know what? Our reasons change sometimes. I might start off homeschooling for these reasons, and then as I grow and kind of mature in my understanding of the world and of God and of kids, my reasons might change and shift. And so there's room for growth there too. I don't think the reasons I homeschool now are exactly identical to what they were when I started. So let me just throw that out there, that no, there are as many reasons to homeschool probably as there are homeschoolers.
Yeah, I have been homeschooling for about I've been homeschooling for about 6 to 7 years whenever I started working in the Sonlight booth all around the country. And it is beautiful to see the diversity of homeschoolers. Whenever I go to Virginia, I've met people who are, the parents that I meet there's such a diversity, and I love that. People who are in all walks of life, people who do all sorts of careers and have all different reasons, children that are involved in all different things, and that are sometimes have a direct link to why they're homeschooling. For example, maybe they're in gymnastics, or just different reasons that people are homeschooling. And I've met fighter pilots that homeschool, and doctors, and mechanics, and I mean, just everything in between. I mean, all over, every career, or people who had high school diploma and people who have multiple degrees. There's just such a diversity, and it's really beautiful. Some of the wisest people I've talked to are some of the most humble, quiet, calm. Those we're talking about calm. A mom who didn't have a background. She did not have a strong education background, and she had such strength when I talked to her. The concerns that she had for her children as she talked to me were amazing, and the insight, and I just think that it's a beautiful diversity within the homeschool community that I did not know. I had been homeschooling for several years before I even knew that it existed, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I find new reasons to homeschool every day. It's funny, I'll text my parents, we're on a text thread, and I'll say, reason 3,247 that I'm glad I homeschool because of XYZ, and then a few weeks later, it's like, oh, I'm also glad I homeschool because of this, or I'm glad I do it because of this. And so, yeah, when I started, it was purely an accidental, like, I don't know where my child's going to go to school. We'll just try this for a year. And then as time has gone on and I've fallen in love with that process and spending that time with my kids, yeah, the reasons change all the time. They get added all the time. And like you guys said, we're as many people as there are in the world. None of us do everything the same. So yes, there may be some commonality between some homeschoolers and some of the reasons, but I'm sure if you actually ask them, well, why are you homeschooling? You'll find that it's very different amongst different families. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here. I hate to wrap up. I could talk to you all day, but we are running low on time, so we are going to wrap up this session. But if you are watching and you have questions or concerns, or maybe you have a really loud naysayer in your life that is planting some myths that you're a little worried about, definitely reach out to us, both in our Sonlight Connections app. All three of us are in there, and we would love to encourage you there. Also, you can contact our advisors through our website. So don't do this alone. One of the best things about homeschooling is that there's other people out there who have walked the road before you or are on the same path. So please do not try to do this alone. Reach out to us and we will offer you encouragement. We've all been there, done that probably. And so we can definitely walk you through those situations. And so Christy and Amber, thank you so much for being here with me today.
You're welcome.